Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our wonderful class, The Pet is Mightier Than the Sword, our Wednesday morning class, and I'm very proud of this Wednesday morning class. Consistency is very important, as we've spoken about in the past, and this class is definitely a consistent class, of course, with a break here and there. Talking about a break, there won't be class next Wednesday. Talking about consistency, but okay. There won't be class next Wednesday, just FYI. I'm taking Batsheva up to camp. So I won't be around to give class. But there should be class the following Wednesday. But just I'll remind everybody again, the end of class. Okay, let's get cracking. Okay, so last week we did a very interesting idea, right? It's been like a theme over here. And I just want to reiterate it very quickly and then talk about the quote of the day and then move on to the next halacha. All right, but the idea was like this, right? The idea was that a lot of times we feel justice to say something, right? Because it's the right thing. Right? It's the right thing. Right, the person's a liar, or you have to expose what people are doing, right? You have to no more secrets. It's my job to make sure that people are informed, or whatever it is. Have a way you portray it, right? Over here they were talking about people that are lying, right? People voice their shock at the wife's intention of breaking up, right? And you have information, right? And then how people are accusing one person, and right? Page 275. Page 275. And we spoke about that falsehood is indeed an evil. How lashon hara is also an evil, right? And two wrongs don't make a right, right? Just because you have information that will change other people's minds about something or whatever it may be, right? And you want to be a crusader for to make sure that people don't speak bad about someone else. Right? Doesn't give you the right to speak bad about someone else, right? So two wrongs don't make a right, as a famous saying goes. Right, two wrongs don't make a right, and that was what we spoke about last week, and we expanded this not only to lashon hara but to a lot of things in our lives. Right, a lot of things in our lives where we justified things and allow other things to slip up. Right, as the beginning of this chapter started off with the famous quote, "Ezu agibora koves esitrei," who is a strong person, one who conquers his evil inclination. Right? And we explained what it means is like this: not only evil stuff, right? Not only things that are struggles we all have, whatever that may be. If it's Shabbos, if it's lashon hara, right? If it's kosher to not being friendly with people, judging people, right? Whatever it is, right? We all have our struggles. But we said it also refers to that a strong person overcomes their challenge, right? Meaning to say that a strong person realizes and doesn't fall to the tricks of the evil inclination when he tries to make things that this is the right thing. And how many times have we done things for the right thing? How many people have died, right, for the righteous cause, right? That's extreme. But in our lives, so many times, and I do it myself too, right? So many times we justify things. If it's from not coming to Shachris in the morning, from Shabbat to kosher, to speaking lashon hara, right? To judging people, to whatever it is, right? Whatever it may be, right? We justify it. Sometimes we just don't know, or we just whatever, right? But a lot of times we also justify it. We give a cause for it, right? And that's where it's Ezo Gibar Kovis Sitzer, one who overcomes his evil inclination. Real strength takes and makes it real. We realize that don't try to justify what you're doing by something else, right? Don't try that. That might be wrong, or it might be a right thing, but that doesn't make this right. right? V'haftarecha kamocha, loving your neighbor as yourself, is a very important mitzvah, but that doesn't justify to transgress other averos, right? Just because we want to love every person favorably. Doesn't mean to say that things are still not right, right? We can't judge the person, but it doesn't make things right. And there's many examples. And over here in Lashon Hara, right, and this is something that happens is when you know information, right, and you want to be able to, right the wrong, right, that people are saying, but the only way to do that is not by bringing up the person that's being talked about, but the only way to do that is by talking negative about someone else. One has to be very wary. Speak to a rabbi, right? See if there's ways of doing it. If it's toelas, people are saying false things, right? Just because you're trying to right a wrong doesn't make it right, right? You have to find out if it falls under the rules of toelas, right? Of the rules of that you're allowed to say it, right? It's not automatically right just because you're trying to wrong or right, and that's something that we spoke about last week, which righting a wrong, right? That's something we spoke about last week, right? And I just wanted to bring that back up because I think it's something that's so powerful, and one of the big causes of us doing a lot of wrong. Right, if it's lashon hara or if it's other practices, if it's because I can't give my 10% because I have I have to do this, that, and this. Maybe maybe not. We have to, whenever we're trying to justify something, make sure we speak to halachic authority to make sure that we're actually correct. It's not the evil inclination trying to make us think that we are doing the right thing. And that's something that's very important to remember. Okay, let's move on to the next halacha. Okay, interesting question. Something that probably pops up, often, not necessarily in this case itself, but in work, with colleagues, with neighbors, play dates, whatever it is, right? This is probably something that comes up. And again, this would fall under rechilas, not lashon hara. And let's see, we spoke about a similar case in lashon hara, but let's see the case over here. Your son is entering the 7th grade, right, in yeshiva. Your friends tell you that her son had a hard time with that particular rebbe because he often raises his voice and made the children nervous. You want your husband to get your son transferred into the other 7th grade, right? I guess they have the luxury of having more than 7th grade, right? Right? I guess some cities don't have that. But you want your kid to be transferred to the other 7th grade, right? But his philosophy is that children should learn to deal with teachers they don't particularly like. Right? To make sure your husband sees the potential damage, you want to say, I heard he's always screaming and embarrassing the kids. They're preferred to him. Are you allowed to say this? Right? Are you allowed to say this? Right? So you have some information that you heard from a second party. Don't forget that. Right? Now you want to talk about this person. Okay, so it's to your husband about your kid. So there is toelas there, right? But at the same time, you're exaggerating a little bit, right? But that's what you heard, right? Are you allowed to say something, yes or no? So Jim over here right away is shaking his head, right? No. Jim is shaking his head no, right? Just wanted to make sure we clarify that. So Jim is on record saying no. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
I say no also.
Oh, sorry, Emily. Page 276. Thank you for asking. All right, page 276, day 97. Okay, go ahead. Who is talking?
This is Cindy. I said no also.
Cindy says no also. You wanna expand on that, or you just want to go with a no?
Okay. Based on what you...
No expansion yet.
Okay. Go ahead, Kayla.
Based on what you just said, the answer is probably no. But I still think you have to. Because
you think you have to. Why do you think you have to?
Because that is your child and his well-being. Yeah. And his ability to be in that class without being scared of this Rebbe. And I think that overrides to some extent.
Okay. Well, let's let's digest that. Anybody else want to comment on that? Go ahead, Suzette.
I have a thought now.
1 second, Suzette. Let's just go back to Cindy for a second. Go ahead, Cindy.
I don't think that we have to, because it's not really harming the person. It would harm the other teacher more than probably harming the child. And like I heard you say, they have to learn how to adjust into different situations, but it's not harming the child, like killing them, but it is harming the other teacher.
Okay, I thank you for that. So we have Chayla on one hand saying that based on the halacha, she realizes no, but she feels that you should because it's your child and you're concerned about your child. Cindy is saying no, because the damage that will happen to the teacher is much greater than the damage that might happen to the child, and therefore you're not allowed to. Go ahead, Suzette.
Good morning. Well, my comments are pretty much in line with what Cindy says in terms of the element of harm, but I don't see any reason to say anything. And as a parent, I would say I've been, we've all maybe experienced this, and my personal philosophy, right or wrong, tends to line up with the husband. You're not always going to have the teacher you want or like, life,
Okay.
Just have to be able to handle it.
Okay. I'm not saying I agree or disagree right now. Okay. Anybody else?
Anybody else? I'll comment.
Anybody else? Emily, any thoughts? Go ahead. First of all, it's nice to have you back.
Thanks. Sorry, it's been a hectic since school ended. So I think like what Chayla is saying is there's some like, I agree with the idea that you want to help your kid out. So if you think it's a situation where like it's gonna be like problematic for your kid, I would definitely try to like get more information or do, I don't know, like I wouldn't just be like, oh, it's rechilas, I'm not getting involved. Like I feel like, okay, so the way that they said it sounds like it is rechilas, like you can't say it that way, but maybe, I don't know, maybe you want to go talk to the principal or do something about it. So you're not letting it go but you're just not addressing it the way that the book said you should address it. So I don't think you should let it go, but I don't think that you should address it. I think you should still need to address it if you're worried.
Okay, I get that. Okay, anybody else? Okay.
Just a little bit on mine, because I had three sons. Yeah, and going through school, and it is difficult. And the principal usually set the tone and made sure that the kids were placed and made you keep them in their class like the first 2 weeks. That was policy kind of. But I, in my heart, I think I would probably try to get him out, and I may have exaggerated, but I shouldn't. But I in my house, I was the person who did the education stuff. So I had a teacher who was teaching Hebrew in high school to my son, and he was abusive. and I had forced him almost to run that class because he had taken Hebrew 1, and then they were offering Hebrew 2, and then they stopped it because it was a public high school. And eventually it ended up that he was kind of an abusive person. And maybe, my interfering is causing the end result to be worse. But he would call my house, this teacher, and then he accused my son of cheating. And I said, well, did you see him cheating? And he said, no, but all the answers were correct. And just one more thing.
So Marcia, so what are you? So are you on Cindy's side or are you on Chayle's side?
I don't know. Jim said no. I don't know. It is difficult, even as the kids are older. So yeah.
So you're more like you're more like treading the line like Emily. That
I want to protect my child.
We have to try to do something, but at the same time we have to be careful with the laws of Rechil.
Right, because sometimes I guess I don't know what you would call it, the karma. It felt like it came back and kicked me after I had done what I had done. So
okay, Jim wants to say something.
Okay, I think everybody's kind of right on this. The way this has been presented to us, the knowledge of this rabbi making the kid nervous is secondhand. So we got to recognize that first. This is not, as Emily said, we need to do a little more investigation. I think at this point, I would probably sit down with, my first thing would be to sit down with the kid and ask him, tell me about this Rebbe. How does he teach? Somebody said that it makes you nervous. I'd find some information and see how the child feels, because the child is the person we want to protect most here. And then based on what that child says, then I might go further and go talk to the principal and things like that. I totally disagree with making something up about him being terrible. That's lying. You can call it drama, but it's lying. So I would just go through a orderly process of trying to figure out how the kid feels about it. If the kid says, yeah, it scares me to death, he yells the kid says he yells all the time, okay, then I can go to the principal with some firsthand comments.
Okay, so I think we're, as Jim said, I think we all are basically, even though we have a sort of a difference of opinion, but I think we're all coming from the same place. I think everybody would agree that you're not allowed to exaggerate, right? You're not allowed to. You're making things up. You're trying to, if it's known that the teachers, be it if it's a Rebbe, a secular teacher, a Jewish teacher, non-Jewish teacher, female, male, right, is abusive. So then there's no question asked. You're not allowed to exaggerate. You have to go straight ahead and take care of it, right? That's not a question. That's toelas, right? Not only for your kid, but for the other kids, right? But that doesn't sound like the situation we're dealing with over here. 99% of the time, that's not the situation that we're dealing with, right? There's extreme cases where you actually have abuse going on, but 99% of the time is different teachers have different ways of teaching, right? Some are a little more, forceful in their way they project things. They're louder, they're rowdier. It's just different teachers have different ways of teaching, and not necessarily, what didn't work for one kid doesn't work for the other kids, right? You heard from one parent, you didn't hear from the other parents, right? Your kid didn't say that he heard from friends that this teacher is a bad teacher and embarrasses all the kids, right? When there is extreme, usually you hear it from more than one parent, right? Especially in a community where people know each other, right? And usually you hear something, your friends, your kids usually will say something that they heard from their friends or something like that. That's usually when it's an extreme situation, right? Just a way of knowing, right? That's typically what would happen, right? As Jim said, as others said, right? There's that what you heard secondhand from one parent, right? So now you are, let's be honest, being a little overprotective parent, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Helicopter parents are never good, right? That's my opinion, right? Being a helicopter parent is never good, right? But also making sure that you are a responsible parent is important. So you have to find a way, as you said, finding out more information, right? As they said, right? You're not allowed to exaggerate. The information must be accurate, and it should be, right, the minimum facts necessary to accomplish the constructive purpose, right? You have to make sure, yes, you have to take care of your children. Kyle, you're right. It's your children. You have to make sure you take care of them. But at the same time, you have to figure out, are you coming from being overprotective? Are you coming from maybe an experience that you had when you were a kid and you want to protect your kids from that, but it's not really something that your kid needs protecting from, right? You heard one thing and therefore now you're judging the whole situation, right? You have to double check and triple check yourself, right? To know why do you want to say something, and you're never allowed to lie, never allowed to exaggerate, right? What we might call white lies, right? You're never allowed to exaggerate, right? Okay, so they scream at the kids. So now you say he shouts, right? So you use a more an adjective that's more, that makes a bigger rosha, makes a bigger impact, right? That's the information you heard. Now, again, what does that mean? Maybe their kid is a nice little lemala, and every time there's a chair that scratches, he goes crazy, right? So, he thinks the teacher screams, right? You have to be very, very careful And this, again, is not only in this situation, right? It's with coworkers. It's with a potential business partner. It's with, it's with neighbors. It's with a new community person that comes to town. One slight bad word could ruin their whole being to acclimate into the community, right? So this is just an example where it's something that we are very protective of. Healthy parents are very protective over their kids, right? But it's not only, this is an example of where we have to be very careful of not exaggerating and making sure that we have all the information before we say something about something that we care a lot about. Any questions or comments? Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so grow your self-control. All right. So last week, as what we spoke about was an introduction to today's class. Right. Today was another. The Chafetz Chaim gives another thing to reflect on. Right, when we're trying to have self-control. Talking to others is one of our main ways to creating bond. Right, talking, communication. Right, not texting and emojis. Right, that is a lack of communication. Right, even though teenagers these days or young professionals, right, that's how they communicate. Right, those studies that were shown that kids sitting right next to each other would rather send an emoji, right, or a text than actually talk to each other. Right, so just where our generation is going. Right, we share our happy news, right, and our woes. Right, offer useful advice, exchange opinions, and of course share ideas and thoughts that inspire us. Right, communication, yes, mostly by talking, also by social media or by texting. Right, the key to prevent these conversations from turning to lashon hara. How do we make sure that these conversations don't turn lashon hara? Yeah, it's summer. Right, July 4th is right around the corner. You're gonna have a July 4th barbecue. Right, of course. Right, what else do you do on July 4th? Right, you're gonna have a July 4th barbecue. Right, with your friends and family. Right, so now you want to make sure that no lashon hara is spoken about. Right, so how do you make sure to prevent these conversations from learning? Says the Chafetz Chaim, is to limit our conversation revolves around other people. And there are things that we should know because they are relevant to us. It might be something we can do to help someone, right, who is facing a challenge. We certainly would want to hear good news, an engagement, a new baby, and so forth. However, when it comes to the soap opera type of tales of other people's personal woes, right, and fables, we're treading on dangerous grounds. If there's no constructive purpose to knowing the information that's forthcoming, our safety strategy is to cut the conversation short or change the subject. The fewer names that come up in our conversations, the fewer they are bound to become lashon hara, right? And this is something that is very important. It sounds very simple, right? But it's very hard, right? I've had this. I'm sure we've all had this. We're talking about it, even when you start talking about it in a positive way, right? Oh, yeah, so and so just got married. Oh, so nice. Yeah, Mazel Tov is so nice. So it's such a beautiful wedding, and then all of a sudden the conversation, turns. Yeah, it was such a beautiful wedding. You noticed by the wedding, how they this person didn't get a honor, a kibbud, right, in the chuppah, right? Did you notice, how they had ice sculptures and all the tables, but tuition, even when you're talking about a nice thing, right? Someone's bris, someone's simcha, right? Someone praising someone, right? How quickly does the conversation start talking about the soap opera, as they call it, right? The other topics of conversation. It happens way too quickly, right? The conversation derails so quickly. That's when you have to start cutting it off, right? Cut off, right? Either by ignoring that comment and going straight to saying, "Oh wow, yeah, the kala looks so beautiful." Right, the bride looks so beautiful, and then switch the conversation to so how's the barbecue doing? Right? How the hot dogs, are they ready? Right, but this is really something that is it just happens. It just happens, right? And I'm sure if you all reflect into your conversations. If it's a Shabbos table, right? If it's a barbecue, if it's a kiddush, right? If it's just having coffee with a friend, right? Even when you're talking about people in a positive way, the conversation somehow, right, derails, and you start talking about soap opera things, right? Even if it's not yet lashon hara or achilas, right? But you're starting to tread the line. It says the Chavetz Chaim, right, that this is where you have to put a cut, a stop, right? And as we spoke about the introduction, that's why they use this quote in Pirkei Avos, Ezu Agibara Kol Misisitra. It takes strength to stop a conversation, right? Because you don't want the other person to think that you're boring. You don't want the other person to not want to talk to you because they have nothing to talk about. Too bad. It takes inner strength, right, to cut the conversation and to switch it to something else, right? And it sounds simple, but it's not. It's really hard. And you're going to say, well, we're not going to talk. We're only going to talk about good things, right? But once we start talking about people, right, a lot of times the conversation switches. So try not to talk about people, right? But if you are, make sure it stays positive. And if it starts getting soap opera, right, conversation, switch the conversation. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Emily.
I was going to say, I think that I totally find that to be true. I think also you have to know who you're talking to. Like there are certain people you can say, like, I could go up to Rabbi Feigenbaum and I can be like, oh, did you hear so-and-so got engaged? And I know that Rabbi Feigenbaum is not going to be like, oh yeah, well they didn't, da, da, da. But like, I think there are certain people who like, that if you mention something positive, they're going to like derail it to something negative. So I think that like, you really have to know who you're dealing with.
100%. You're 100% correct. The people that you're talking to also, it would make a difference regarding what initial conversation you start off with. 100%. You're right. Unfortunately, right? But that some people, right, the conversation will totally derail, and other people, right, would be conscious about it just like you are. And if it does start derailing, we'll be very happy for one of us to switch the conversation, say, hey, let's just stop this, and we'll totally understand. And on the contrary, praise you for stopping the conversation. 100%. You're 100% correct. Great point. Anybody else? Go ahead, Suzette.
So I think for, most of us, this one, we're in this situation oftentimes. And I like the comment, the building within, that use the sound of other people's names as an alarm bell to warn yourself that lashon hara is likely to be forthcoming. I can attest to the fact that there are often times that, I see the circumstance coming and I get cold feet. Okay, what am I going to do now? My backup crew class isn't here with me, So one, and I shared this with Martha, is one thing I did, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, is I distract myself and I tune out. So what I did in a couple of circumstances was I just started like humming in my mind so that I wouldn't pay attention to the conversation. And then, I tried to, bring myself back when it seemed to have moved on, because it's very hard. And one of the challenges I find is you want to really balance, other traits of being humble and not correcting people all the time, because it is hard. It's very hard when you're in social circles. So that is my comment.
Yeah, it's a great point you're saying, and thank you for that. Not always do we have the strength or the ability to change a conversation, right? And to leave the whole conversation, that takes really tremendous amount of strength. So the least you can do is to try to distract yourself, right? Hum or whatever it is. It's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. And thank you. That's a excellent point that you brought up. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Okay, so let's do the quote of the day. And this is a very important quote of the day. They're all very important, but it really puts things in perspective. So it says like this: about that which enters your mouth, you scrutinize, right, and investigate. So that may be for kosher, which, of course, right, we have to do halachically, or it may be for gluten, sugar, fats, right, and all other, nowadays things that we scrutinize ourselves. If it's for health reasons, for cultural reasons, for whatever other reasons, but there is no one that could say, I don't want to say there's no one, I'm sure there's some people that just eat whatever comes to them, right? But I would say that probably majority of us nowadays scrutinize what goes into our mouths, right? Let's hope it's because of kosher, right? And also for other reasons, right? For example, I'm allergic to some stuff, right? Baruch Hashem, thank God it's not deathly, right? But I look at packages a lot. Does it have corn, right? Does it have potato? Does it have, right? Other things that I'm allergic to, right? So, and of course, I look if it's kosher, right? But we scrutinize what goes into our mouths, right? We do, right? So, but about which leaves it, we have no questions. Right? Why don't we scrutinize what leaves our mouth? Right? So, what comes into our mouths, we scrutinize. What goes out of our mouths, so we should scrutinize that too. And I think it's a very important quote, right? Just putting it in perspective, right? Again, that we have to be very careful what goes out of our mouths, just like what goes into our mouths, right? And start scrutinizing it and reflecting on it, right? To make sure that what goes out is not dangerous for other people and for ourselves, right? And I think that's just a nice way of putting it. Any questions or comments on the quote? Go ahead, Martha.
I just have a question. Is that coming from a book, a person, the Sefer?
Yeah, so Sefer.
When was
this? Yehudi. It's a Sefer. I'm not sure who authored this one. I have to look it up. I don't recall it offhand who authored it, right? But it is a Sefer. The quotes usually come from a Sefer. Some of them, most of them, I know who authored them, and some of them I don't know offhand who authored. But I could definitely look it up.
That's a very good one. I like this.
Well, thank you, or thank him.
Or her. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So I think we have time for one more halacha. You guys are ready? Ready to do one more halacha? Let's do one more halacha. It's a chaparine, especially that I won't be here next week. Oh yeah, for those that weren't here at the beginning of the class, next week there's no class. I will be taking Batsheva up to camp, so I'll be leaving at 6:40 in the morning. All right, so no class next week. Okay, so the dilemma, and I haven't looked at this myself, so we're looking at this together. All right, the man who opened a competing pizza shop a block away from yours and cut your business in half is standing at the shul kiddush, right, talking to his friends about your friend's ice cream shop. Right, I can't stand that guy. I'm going to tell people his cones are stale and his chocolate ice creams is cheap. Right, imitation. Doesn't stand a chance. The man brags. You think he does these things on purpose? He's a snake. Your friends need to know this information, but may you be the one to tell him when in your heart you are delighted, you're in the pain of this evil man a few shades darker. Right? So the question is like this, right? You have a reason to say something because of competition, right? Because of this person's hurting your business, right? You don't like the person, right? Those are the reasons why. It's not coming from a place of, not coming from a good place. Just put it that way, right? So, right. So, are you allowed to say something? Yes or no? What do you guys think?
I would.
Okay, why?
I would, just from the standpoint of, and I understand he's got his own motive, but this man's going to say things that could hurt this other man's business and falsehoods. And so I would tell my friend that this is what he said. and then let the friend decide, what to do from there. The friend may decide to do nothing. The friend may confront him. But at least he's aware of a falsehood being spread in the community that could hurt his not only his business, but his reputation.
Okay. So Jim is saying yes, because this person is spreading falsehood that will ruin his business and
his reputation too.
Right, his reputation also, right? So you have to be, and even though it's coming from a bad place, and it's coming from a bad place, right? You have to try to control yourself and say the information as accurate and without any, not in a derogatory way. Right? What?
No delight. He
should delight in right? No delight.
He should.
Right? And not be delighted from the information. That's Jim's opinion. What do you guys think? Emily?
I would actually, depending, I guess, who the rabbi is, I would probably go to the rabbi and tell him what's going on. Because maybe he could address it with that individual and not, so you're not creating rechilus with between those two people. But like let's say it's a rabbi who would, do something about it, assuming, then I would talk to the rabbi and tell him what's going on. So I would leave so that your friend doesn't have to know that this guy's doing it, but somebody would help out.
Okay. So the rabbi, or if someone else that might be a third party that could say something in a proper way. Okay. Anybody else?
I think, again, last week at the end, we talked about overhearing things. This is wide open at a kiddush table. I mean, he's saying nasties to like the whole community, yeah?
Okay, so you're saying that other people heard this?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So this is not just something that you overhear something. This is something that's straight out there in the open, right? And therefore, it's not secondhand, it's firsthand, right? And other people heard it. And therefore, you should definitely say something. That's your conclusion?
This is nasty. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Suzette?
I say leave this one for the rabbis to figure out. That's what I say.
You start whistling.
There's a famous...
start whistling.
Be humming and whistling. I'm out of there.
There's a famous rabbi that once was speaking to a group of rabbis and giving them some tips and things like that. And he told them, you have to realize the rabbis are like the broom. And they said, well, what do you mean? He says, what does a broom do? It cleans up the floor, but it itself gets all the schmutz, gets all the dirt. All right. So he said, so a rabbi always has to double check himself because, he gets to hear all the information. He's cleaning up the community, but he always has to make sure that they themselves are constantly cleaning themselves because they do. You get dirty by hearing all this information. So, here we go again. Back to the right. No, and I'm not disagreeing with you. Right? But, tell the rabbi. Okay. Anybody else? Cindy, you want to add in over here?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Bonnie?
I do think it's a good idea to get a rabbi involved if, he's the type that would be comfortable with that. I'm wondering, though, if it's better that this third party, be it a rabbi or someone else, talk to the man who's being spoken about, or really speak to the man who's doing the talking and just like straight him out and say, you can't say this will be a known thing. If I don't know exactly the right approach with the talking, that the rabbi's saying, we're going to let everybody know you're talking like this, and this is going to be detrimental to your own pizza shop. Just something that, because if you already have somebody who's opening a competing store, taking away business, knowing that, and then he's bragging that he's going to bring somebody else's business down as if he's proud of it, that's pretty disgusting. And certain people you have to speak to certain ways. So I'm just wondering if the better approach is talking to the person who's about to speak and say, you should not do this, you better not do this, because if you do, you know what I mean? certain
No,
people.
100%, 100%. I hear what you're saying, and I think that's if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what Emily and Suzette are referring to also, to speak to the guy, not necessarily speak to the person that's being spoken about. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I think they refer to getting the rabbi involved to speak to that individual that is spreading the rumors or spreading falsehood. Not saying that he might have to speak to the person that's being spoken about too, but let the rabbi use his wisdom of how to tackle the situation to make sure that no one gets hurt. But yeah, 100%. There's different ways, especially if it's a small community, if it's a bigger community, if it's only one synagogue, couple synagogues, right? There could be different ways of dealing with it. Then it depends on a lot of different outer factors. But I hear your point. Good point. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so let's look at the halakha, and then I want to expand on it for a minute because you guys are all bringing out good points, right? Your friends should be told, right? As Jim pointed out, this is slander, right? This is going to hurt his reputation, right? His business, his financial, being able to provide parnasa for his family. Right? If someone else at the kiddush who doesn't have bad feelings for the speaker heard his comments, that person should be the one who tells your friend about the threat, right? So I think Martha brought that up. This is at a kiddush, right? This is a lot of people heard. This is not just something that was said to you in private, or someone else told you something that someone told them in private, right? So there's probably a lot of other people that heard this. However, if there is no one else, you should work on yourself, right? To dispel the spirit of feelings before relating the information, right? You have to make sure that you work on yourself, that the information you're giving is factual, right? And not with any joy or delight for saying something about your competition. Now, they do not bring out going to a third party, but I do think that that's something that should be considered. I think it's something that we could. I think it's something that should be considered because there are ways of dealing with things, right? Especially if it's a smaller community, right? If it's like a Toronto, right, or Chicago, whatever, right? So in your small, if they both go to the same shul, so that's one thing, But if it's from a different shul, happens to be there or whatever it is, right? So a lot of times it's harder to actually do something about it besides just telling the person that they are doing wrong, right? And letting the person know that someone's spreading stuff about them, right? But if it is in a smaller community, if it's something where something will be able to be done, it is sometimes smarter to get a rabbi or a very important person in the community that people respect and honor, right? That would use their wisdom, go over to the person and say, hey, listen, this has to stop. And otherwise we're going to put a cherem on you. We could, right? If you are talking negative about other people or hurting other people's business, right? We will we'll say that people shouldn't shop at your store, right? Or we're going to make a public announcement that the rumors that have been spread, and people are going to know who it is, right, about this person's store, and we just want to make an announcement to say that this was checked out and verified that it's not true, and these are rumors and lies that were spread about this person, and everybody's going to know who it was because it's a small community. Because as you said this in public and people heard you, and people are going to know that you are a liar, right? And it's going to go ahead and hurt you. So there are ways of trying to stop this, and also making the person aware, right? Where you also have to be very careful, because when you do make the person aware, it could start a whole war, right? It could start another war. Right? You have competition, right? But he never spoke negative about your store, right? And even if he might have, but you're controlling yourself. Listen, you can be the bigger person. You're just going to do your business and your thing, right? But you don't know how your friend's going to react, especially his reputation about his cones or whatever it is, right? So you also have to be very careful. Yes, the person has to know, right? The situation has to be put to stop, but it has to be done with wisdom of where it doesn't create another war, where this person is now going to say something about them, or you are going to create, their kids not talking, their grandkids not talking, whatever it is, right? You have to be very careful, right? And how to present this and how to make sure to try to avoid a machlokas. And then usually with these machlokas, usually people take sides because everybody has their friends and everybody has their guys, right? And their people, right? And there's usually and you could create a whole division in the community, right? So it's something that really has to be done with wisdom and something that really has to be tackled. Now, if it's a huge community again, and there's whatever, it's someone that you don't really know, say, hey, just I'm letting you know that, I was at a different shul and someone was talking about your cones, if you want to like prove it that it's not or whatever it is, right? But if it's more of a smaller community, same shul, even if it's a large community, but from the same shul, things like that, it can really create a tremendous machlokas. As it says, Chacham ena baroso, a wise person, his eyes are in his forehead. Means to say that they see the future, they see things in the distance of how things could play out, right? How things could play out and make sure to avoid the outcome that could be detrimental. Not saying that this person doesn't have the right to know, not saying that this person's business and reputation is not important. Of course it is, but it just has to be done with chachma, with wisdom. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Just a quick reminder again, there is no